Get everything you need for your next job without the hassle at AquaBluMosaics.com. We carry everything from high-quality pool tile, porcelain pavers, grout, fire and water features, and everything in between that you need to get your project done and put some money in your pocket. A literal showroom in the palm of your hand, we are the most powerful tool any pool contractor can have in their pocket. Become an Aqua Pro and save money on every order, get free samples, and have full access to our unmatched customer service. Easy to remember, hard to forget. Visit AquaBluMosaics.com.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast. Today I'm chatting with Joe Raboine, Vice President of Design with Oldcastle APG. Joe has been a guest on the podcast before where we've had him come on to share his expertise and will be joining us today to talk about outdoor living trends in 2025. It's a pleasure to have you with us today on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure being here.
Is it 2025 already? I kind of snuck up on me there, but here we are. A lot of changes happening all around us, and the backyard is no exception, I guess. That's why I'm pleased to have you here with us today, Joe. I mean, you got your finger on the pulse, more or less, of what's happening and trending with consumers, especially as it pertains to the outdoor living sector.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. I would say, it's been an interesting last few years. In 2025, we're pretty optimistic it's going to be a great year overall, but there are some things that have shifted a little bit over the past year or two that we're noticing. And I'd love to kind of talk through it, and in any way I could help provide some context or insights would be fantastic.
Awesome. Well, Joe, with the increasing emphasis on maximizing smaller footprints in the backyard, the concept of multifunctional outdoor spaces is gaining a lot of traction. And it's become more prevalent in recent years. I mean, how are homeowners designing these areas to serve multiple purposes, and what are the key considerations in their planning?
Yeah, this is an interesting trend. It's something that we've been watching for quite a while. And actually, some of it, the research that we've done recently is somewhat surprising. But, you look at historically the size of American backyards in particular, the last 30, 40 years, they've been cut in half, which I don't think would be a surprise to most people. But they're averaging the new construction with that old historic footprint, going back quite a ways. And in a lot of communities today, the average lot size is actually under 7,000 square feet. And at the same time, when you look at kind of the context of higher interest rates from a few years ago, just inflation in general, and kind of where people's heads are at, a lot of people are buying new homes or existing homes that don't have a lot of space. And I think in their minds, they may not be able to achieve the outdoor space that they want, or at least they don't think they can. And so for us, and we really step back for a second, we analyze it, and look at, okay, well, what do these footprints look like? In a lot of cases, there is actually quite a bit of room. It's just the perception of, a lot where you may have 20 feet going back to a fence behind your house versus the lots of yesteryear that were a half an acre. The perception in your mind is like, I can't do anything there. It's like, well, if that were a room in your house that was 20 feet wide by 50 feet long, that would be a very large room. And so it's really shifted the way that we're thinking about marketing, thinking about product, and part of what we're trying to do is show both the consumer, but also obviously the design community and our contracting community what you can do in a small space, and don't overlook those spaces, because number one, they're here to stay, and don't just relegate outdoor living to the backyard. Look at the side yard, look at the front yard. Like, where can you add outdoor living features that really do enhance their life and do help them achieve that landscape, that outdoor living space of their dreams?
Yeah, I believe the terminology that you guys use is micro spaces, right?
Yeah, that's what we just crafted something that, in terms of outdoor living, I don't think is a term that's been used, but the idea is that, hopefully elicit the idea, like, these are small spaces. So we're using that to try to shape that conversation. And it's been interesting. I've given a handful of, even just recently, presentations to contractors and in a lot of communities, let's say like Arizona or in Texas, and again, really anywhere that you have this density of housing in most major cities, it really sparked a conversation about, because I would say, even if you look at what we've done on the Bellegarde and overall Oldcastle side for years, the projects that we like to promote are those big estate-sized projects. Well, a lot of consumers look at it and are like, I can't, I'll never have that. So they may not even reach out. So I think a lot of contractors are guilty of that too. And I know, the history. I was a contractor for 17 years, and I was right there too. Like, I'm not going to market to this, this community because their lots are just too small. In reality, a lot of those spaces, those homes are still, 600,000, a million. I mean, they're not inexpensive houses. And a lot of those people had large suburban sized lots and not necessarily downsized, but they wanted to get into more walkable communities, closer to amenities, and they still want it, but I don't think they can get it. And, those small jobs, those quote micro spaces, they can still easily be $100,000 job. It's not, you start packing in kitchens and plunge pools and fencing and vertical gardens, like you can fill up a space quickly. But I think at the end of the day, it's exciting because it opens up a whole new segment of the market that we didn't always think about, and is actually not even the exception anymore. That's the norm today. So, I think collectively, if we could figure out how to develop products, develop design techniques and approaches, man, we could grow our industry in a lot of ways.
Well, you mentioned vertical gardens and how folks in more urban areas are looking for that kind of outdoor living environment. But incorporating natural elements into outdoor living spaces is a very prominent trend for 2025. Could you share your thoughts on how this movement is kind of shaping current outdoor design practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. Since the pandemic, and if you've heard me speak before in the last few years, I talk about this a lot. And this idea has actually shaped the tagline of what we're talking about at Oldcastle overall. And so we just a couple of years ago launched Live Well Outside as in a way, in some ways, our mission, right? Where we know that people, and we're involved in lots of different groups that are studying the science behind how our brains respond to being in natural environments, being in beautiful spaces. And this isn't just coming from us. We know now that to be a well-rounded human being, we need to spend more time in nature. In fact, we spend very little time in nature today compared to 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so the way that people think about outdoor spaces now versus pre-pandemic is generally people know that they feel better when they're outside, and they're valuing these spaces more. They kind of rediscovered how these spaces made them feel. And a big part of that is incorporating natural elements, obviously plantings, but even natural stone, natural textures. Even if it's a man-made product like a concrete paver, the natural textures themselves can kind of elicit some of the benefits that our brains respond to in these environments. So, but what I think is really cool about it, it changes the narrative from an outdoor living space being purely thought of as a place to entertain, which it clearly still is, but more so like a space where you can recharge, you can kind of decompress, a sanctuary, a place of peace. And so you think about that value proposition of developing a space that not only helps improve your overall quality of life, but it's a space that you could use on a daily basis versus just purely to entertain. It changes the conversation, and it changes the way a designer should be thinking about how the space is utilized. Because yes, a beautiful outdoor bar and kitchen is a key part of that, but what about a space to read a book or take a nap or just recharge and listen to music, or and how does that environment, how do you engage all your senses, right? The things you hear, the way the wind kind of hits your face, where the sun positioning is, all those are consideration, or should be, when you're thinking about a space that really enhances someone's life on a daily basis. And I think that's super exciting. I think with that idea and with the shifting mindset of the consumer, it changes how we move forward with outdoor living and how we create spaces that enhance people's lives in a lot of different ways, both personally, socially, spiritually, all those things. And incorporating natural elements is a huge part of that.
I like what you said there, Joe. I mean, yeah, it is definitely extending itself into how people feel when they get home. All those elements, those tactile, visual, auditory, spiritual, all comes into play. And how they feel about their outdoor space extends really into incorporating more sustainable materials into their outdoor living space. And that's definitely been a growing trend with homeowners and designers. What are some of the eco-friendly options that kind of embrace the aesthetic appeal of patios and driveways and walkways?
Yeah, it's interesting because you look at this in the context of those smaller footprints again, and kind of pulling these trends together. So what's interesting, people today value, I would say, sustainability and that idea more than ever, and especially millennials and younger. not that I think most people are more aware of the idea of stewardship and being a better steward of their local environments. But it's not as easy to do necessarily when you're in a denser area, right? Like, how do you bring in natural elements? You don't have those big expansive yards. You don't have those views necessarily. What is nice though is in a smaller footprint, you could add more features and do things that sometimes cost a bit more, right? Where you maybe source a material that has more recycled content, or you do a permeable pavement installation to help with groundwater aquifer replenishment. So some of those types of things. I think it's something, again, that's incumbent upon us to help bring a solution for, the idea of, what can you do vertically, right? Can you add trellises that are planted? Can you encourage the idea of native landscapes, right? Where you're helping with the biodiversity that is native in that area, right? I think there's a lot of really cool information that's coming out about that, and how even small spaces can help pollinators, for instance. People are very interested also in, rather than just create or plant a non-native ornamental, can I plant something that provides food, right? Let's say blueberry bushes or vines or, grapevines, things like that, where the landscape is helping the local ecosystem, but it's also providing food and doesn't necessarily need pesticides. All those things, gardening, raised beds, those are all hot button topics for a lot of people. In fact, since the pandemic, I think the stats are somewhere around 18 million millennials began gardening, right? So you look at the gardening part of landscape, which is something historically, I would say out there living contractors haven't even thought of really, and again, now you have a small footprint. How can I make a space that encourages people to be outside, that's helping a local environment, that's helping them physically, spiritually, mentally? Gardening has huge benefits to reducing stress. And so there's a lot of things I would say when you look at sustainability, clearly recycled products or products that, are using content like that is important, but the functional and physical kind of interaction is a big part of that too. One of the things that we love to say, like, sustainability really also starts with helping people fall back in love with nature, and getting them outside is really the only way to do that, right? Because if you're not outside, you don't appreciate. Just like anything, you don't appreciate something, you don't care about it, you're not going to protect it. And when we believe getting people outside is a huge first step in having that conversation.
I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, gardens definitely got a renaissance period during the pandemic for sure. I mean, as outdoor living spaces kind of continue to evolve, how do you see the interplay of color shaping the overall aesthetic of these areas? I mean, can you share any examples with us, Joe?
Yeah, color is a funny thing. Even up until a few years ago, from a product perspective, we treated color as, like, in some ways a footnote. Like, hey, we have this new layout, we've got this new shape, we've got this new texture. And we didn't necessarily think about color as being as important as it is. And we would just, but this is a popular color we've had before, let's just put the same color on it. Well, what we now know, again, coming from data from many different angles, is color is actually the most important thing for the consumer. Color can elicit a lot of emotions, so that's part of it. But if you don't have the right color and you haven't thought about how that color interacts with the rest of the landscape and the home, you may not get the sale at all, right? If you think about it, like, if I'm going to go buy a car and they don't have the color I like, I'm probably not going to buy the car, right? It's the same, or a piece of furniture or a piece of clothing. It's the same with landscape, right? If you don't have the right paver color or wall color, that consumer could go somewhere else. But so I think for us, it's become the first thing we actually think about now. We look at it like, hey, how can we use color to change the way that the landscape turns out? How do all the colors work together? How do these colors interact with things like furniture and other things that are within that space? So color for us has become more important than ever, and it's really shaping the way that we think about product development and design and all those things.
Yeah, I mean, we see consumers doing a lot of exciting things with mixing colors and mixed use materials. I mean, can you maybe provide us with some real world examples that are kind of trending with consumers?
Yes, absolutely. Consumers historically, and primarily, if you look back with Oldcastle, 10 years ago, we were really a concrete products company, right? We're doing pavers and walls. And since then, we've expanded into all aspects of outdoor living products with fencing, decking, railing. And again, the projects overall, there's a lot of reasons we've done that. We just see the proliferation and excitement around outdoor living now being the number one trend by many people, many organizations, research. And But we look at it like they've become very complex spaces, and choosing all those materials, even I'm a designer, even within my own company, it's difficult sometimes to navigate the choices, and trying to make sure to connect the dots so that it makes sense is huge. So it's forced us again to think through, and we just recently, if anybody was at one of our trade shows last year, you may have seen a graphic, kind of like a mood board that we had it as architectural black, right? And within that, it showed all of what we would have paired products. We had pavers, walls, we had railing in there, fencing, that you could just look at and go, oh, I love that. I like that. And so, again, this is nothing new, right? If you're doing a kitchen remodel, or you're, again, using a car example, buying a home, you can see these examples in a lot of areas. But we're starting to think through that lens of, all right, well, if we're going to develop this product, how does it interact with other products? And some of those aren't even our products, right? If it's, let's say, whatever the trend might be out in the field, furniture, whatever, lighting, do we have the right colors, and do they work with other things that are popular, and do they align with a home style in any given market? And what we're trying to do is just make it less complex, right? Or you can just see something, you love it, your decision-making process is much easier versus just starting kind of from scratch every time, which even for a designer is not easy always to make those choices.
Yeah, I love the creative palette that you had at the booth. That's where they were really discussing combining like pavers with composite decking or faux turf, stone. And then it really talked about like how to do like these cool outdoor flooring, seamless transitions, and how to combine concrete porcelain pavers to create a really striking look in the backyard.
Yeah, I think people are definitely, I appreciate that, by the way. I think people are much more in tune with design than ever before, and are more open to experiment with color and texture and mixed materials. And I think that's cool. I mean, when we were contracting, it was almost 100% hardscapes, right? Because somebody called us, we were like, hey, we're going to sell you the most hardscapes we can. And the reality is, most people have a deck. They might want natural stone incorporated. They have certain materials they want. Maybe it's glass, metal, corten steel, things like that. And I think the combination of those makes much more interesting spaces and more, kind of engaging spaces. So I'm excited to see that trend, but kind of, again, at the same time, it creates a level of complexity. So that's where, we're trying to use our network and relationships and insights into creating those palettes that just make that easier for people.
Sure. Well, I mean, I know from my experience of going to all the trade shows, I know that the wellness concept is really hot right now, and creating an escape retreat at home is becoming ever more prevalent with today's consumers. I mean, what kind of elements are homeowners adding to their outdoor living environment to create a more Zen-like experience in the backyard?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you look at, kind of the zones again, where you kind of have the cooking, dining, living, I think everyone is still very interested in those zones. And things like fire features are always going to be popular. Water features, including, hybrid spaces of, let's say, plunge pools that kind of, may have spillovers and scuppers going into them. And all those are things people are interested in. And again, we go back to the small space footprints that really are becoming the norm. People are very interested in privacy. They're looking at these spaces like, I want to go home after work and I'm going to listen to some music, have a glass of wine, and I want to shut off the outside world, right? So thinking through, again, the space, like you may need to create some barrier of privacy. That could be a fence, it might be a vertical garden, it might be a hedge, might be decorative screen panels. There's so many different ways to do that today. But think through, like, what does it sound like? Do you hear lots of road noise? Jets, might be near an airport, whatever that is. You might hear neighbors if you're in a bigger complex. So I heard a term a couple of years ago, which I love. It's this idea of a sound garden. Like what can you do to mask that? It might be a pondless waterfall or a formal water feature. It might be a set of wind chimes. It might be something that's creating some type of white noise, essentially. As an outdoor living designer, I would say we don't think about that enough, probably. But when you start thinking that way, and I have a lot of good examples of that I've heard from designers, that it really changes the narrative, and it shows the consumer that, wow, this person really is trying to create the best space for me, that's private, that it's soothing, and really helps me recharge.
Sure. I mean, we see more designers shifting towards creating these kind of seamless transitions in the outdoor living area. Kirk Bianchi, a leading designer, called this almost an outside in approach to contemporary outdoor living design. I mean, can you talk
Hmm.
about what kind of products that you see consumers using to create that kind of seamless transition between their indoor and outdoor space and kind of enhance the flow of their home that way?
Yeah, I love this is probably my favorite topic actually, which because I think it goes to the core of knowing that land is at a premium, knowing that, people have these smaller footprints, that people are thinking about health and wellness and that they want a better connection to the outdoors. I think the building community is super intrigued by this, but they don't necessarily know how to go about this. And this is where I think our industry can work closely with them. You think about there's several ways, right? Number one, physically connecting with the outdoors. I would say gone are the days of the single door or even the sliding patio door being the only way to do it, right? Because you have things like nano walls and folding walls and phantom screens, and there are ways to design homes better. It doesn't necessarily cost more money either, where you create a better physical connection. And once you come out of the home, like thinking through like this kind of having a zero edge transition where you don't just drop off 18 inches to the backyard, right? You come out seamlessly and then slowly transition to the backyard and keeping those heights at a certain level so that it's smoother and easier. But then also thinking through like the context of if you're going to have an outdoor space with a kitchen, for instance, how is that located to the interior kitchen? Can you do things where you have, let's say, a section of glass that has a bar that interfaces that you can open a window to the inside of that kitchen and foster conversations between the two? How is the space visually connected? If you're going to put an outdoor fireplace in, how is that fireplace lined up with whatever it may be on the inside? Because it will become a focal point that could draw people out there. And just thinking through, again, vertical gardens or raised beds, can you create, a small raised garden bed area that's adjacent to a kitchen that has, herbs, for instance, or tomatoes, or maybe it's by a pizza oven and you want to have tomatoes and onions and all those things you can use for toppings. It's a more synergistic approach to overall design. It's not just out there living, it's really that entire home itself. And I think if you start looking through that lens, knowing that the outside footprint is smaller, you can make a smaller home feel much larger if you can create a better physical and visual transition. And I think these ideas resonate, number one, with consumers. They also resonate with builders. We have the ability to create some efficiencies that would open up these things to more people, right? Where my hope is that this idea becomes more normal and becomes more of the standard as time moves on. I think the majority of people are starving for those types of spaces. So, and I would say don't overlook the front yard. I think there's a resurgence of front porches. I think even existing homes adding things we call the social courtyard, right, where it may not be a porch, but it's a courtyard in the front. Maybe there's a fire pit up there, which encourage social discussions and conversations. I think if we start looking at all those possibilities, we've got a pretty exciting future in our industry.
I'm glad you hit on some of these things, Joe. I mean, it's definitely more relatable, I think, to most people. I mean, beyond creating an aesthetically pleasing environment for your home, I mean, these people are also focused on functionality. I mean, we see consumers incorporating dual purpose materials. They're looking for products that are not only aesthetically pleasing, but help them create
Mm-hmm.
a more comfortable outdoor living area. I mean, can you discuss any kind of trending products consumers are looking for in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, they're looking to make the spaces more comfortable, and again, in that small footprint, some of the ways I would say that some of those things can be done is creating these hybrid spaces. So if you don't have a lot of space, or you don't have the budget necessarily to do a very large space, even if you have the footprint, creating spaces that can be used in kind of in a hybrid environment. So great examples of that would be, let's say you need to build a retaining wall, right? Well, why not build a built-in seating area as part of that, where you don't just have a 4-foot wall, you've got a bench and built-in section there. Maybe you've got some hidden storage where the seats flip up and you can store your seat cushions in there or your pool equipment, whatever it might be. And maybe you have a raised fire pit that has a cover on it and it's used as a coffee table most of the time. So you don't necessarily have to have these individual defined rooms for a purpose. Most of those spaces you can have 2 or 3 things going on in at once. And again, if you're able to do that, you can add features like maybe you have custom cushions made for those spaces, and you make the spaces more comfortable. You use higher quality materials. Again, adding things like permeability, lighting, music, sound, all those things in a small space can be really effective. So I think all those are hot button topics. Again, maybe incorporate some outdoor areas where you can take a nap, right, that are shaded. Like, think about how, when you're outside, like, how can I make this space more comfortable in many ways? There's some really cool ideas out there to be able to do that.
Well, great insights, Joe. I mean, finally, I think this is an appropriate topic since we're having this discussion in January. I mean, how do you see design trends evolving to make outdoor spaces usable throughout the year, regardless of the climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know many people are in the deep freeze right now. Even where I'm at in Georgia, it's pretty chilly. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, when you're in a really cold climate, I was a contractor in Wisconsin, so that was probably one of the extremes. But you think about things like fire features, obviously can be helpful, ways to do that. Covering, I think pergolas are still very popular, but pavilions I think are much more functional. So a lot of people are looking at that. And once you have those types of structures, there's so many ways now to add things like infrared heating that's either electric or propane or gas. And so you think about, like, normally in your head, you're like, an outdoor living space is when I'm in my shorts and I'm hanging around the pool or having a barbecue. But even on a sunny day in January, in a lot of climates, if you're out of the wind, you've got a fire going, you've got some infrared heaters, you can still be outside. You can still watch a game. You can still have a beer with your buddies or a glass of wine. Like, there are ways. It doesn't have to be 85 degrees and sunny to enjoy an outdoor space. And I think people, even in the winter, you need that connection to nature and something that a lot of people don't get. So I think thinking through, obviously, if you're going to be out when it's snow covered, you're going to want a space that you can get out of the wind and can be dry. And so don't just look at purely these pavements and patio spaces. Start thinking through, like, what type of shade structure or cover can I incorporate? And some of it might be something a little less expensive. It could be a canvas type cover, something that's a little more, quote, temporary, I guess. But don't forget those heating elements as part of that. Think through what that space could look like, no matter what time of year it is.
Absolutely. I mean, I love this topic, Joe, and really informative discussion with you. I love talking about what's happening in the backyard. I thank you so much for sharing your expertise about what's popular and trending in the outdoor living area this year. Thanks for stopping by and taking time out to connect with our audience.
No, anytime. I love this, and I appreciate the time as well, and look forward to a great 2025 and beyond. Hope everyone has a great year.
Well, that's all the time we have left today. Make sure to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Pool Magazine Podcast.
Get everything you need for your next job without the hassle at AquaBluMosaics.com. We carry everything from high-quality pool tile, porcelain pavers, grout, fire and water features, and everything in between that you need to get your project done and put some money in your pocket. A literal showroom in the palm of your hand, we are the most powerful tool any pool contractor can have in their pocket. Become an Aqua Pro and save money on every order, get free samples, and have full access to our unmatched customer service. Easy to remember, hard to forget. Visit AquaBluMosaics.com.